What is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough. Vanguard, NE.ca. I'm Norman James along with Mike Jello. Happy Sunday Spectacular to our listeners. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And we'll throw a couple of happy Father's Days out to the soon-to-be fathers out there. Just be careful. It's coming soon. Michael, how are you, buddy?
Happy Father's Day to you, Norman, and good afternoon. It's a Sunday where everybody is busy either celebrating Father's Day or getting ready for a trip to Western Canada, which I am
or
doing
getting
right now.
ready to crowd into various parts of Toronto's downtown for the historic Raptors NBA championship parade tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. Pretty impressive, eh? The Raptors, and again, everything relates to the Leafs in some way because it does. But that was an impressive run. Nice to see, and maybe their hockey brothers can emulate that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for the fans of in Toronto that finally got a chance to celebrate a championship for the first time. I mean, I know the Marlies won in 2018. I know the Toronto FC won a couple years before that, but this is the first major championship since 1993.
It's huge.
When the Blue Jays won their second. It's huge, but and honestly, I mean, in terms of the Leafs, I think it's a good thing for one aspect. I think this puts more pressure on the Maple Leafs to do what Masai Ujiri and the Raptors did, which is go for it, because they're going to have their core locked up once they get Mitch Marner signed. And I think this is an opportunity, where I think the fan base is hungry for this team to just go for it. And I don't know if that could mean trading for a defenseman, that could mean shaking up the roster, but they really do have to go for it, because I think the fan base is a little frustrated with the Leafs.
And going for it, you mean the Leafs getting rid of Garrett Sparks, because we know he is the one holding them back, right? What's the latest on that?
Well, yeah, but yes, Pierre LeBrun reported earlier this week that the Leafs had been quietly shopping Garrett Sparks, and not to take anything away from Pierre because his sources are impeccable, but I could have told you that they were going to be shopping Garrett Sparks as soon as Michael Hutchinson was made the backup for Sparks right before the beginning of the playoffs, because that kind of lack of confidence in a goaltender who had been with you the entire year is essentially a ticket out of town. And I think that there's no way that Mike Babcock was going to give Garrett Sparks the number 2 job next year, when we all think that whoever the number 2 is going to play a lot more than 20 some odd games, because you see what's going on in the NHL with goaltenders playing 30 to 35 to spell the starter. And I just don't think that Babcock is ever going to have confidence in Garrett Sparks after the type of inconsistent year that he had last year. So hopefully he finds a good landing spot and he can continue his NHL career, but it's not going to be.
Hindsight is 20/20, Mike, but you and I and many people foresaw what happened with Garrett Sparks. We knew he wasn't going to be an adequate backup. We knew the Nylander situation would turn out to be a fiasco and a huge failure. It was. We also knew, like most people, that the Leafs defense left something to be desired. It did. I'm a little surprised Mike Babcock didn't shake out some of the earwax from his ears and, tune in a little bit more to what needed to be done, as opposed to being staunch and withdrawn into his old ways. That was unfortunate. So, look, going forward, Nylander's back or not, we're not going to have to deal with this distraction. So that's off the board. The defense is still an issue. Garrett Sparks, move on from him and replace him with someone. So that won't be an issue. It's all about trying to mitigate the question marks for a season that should not be about a question mark, might it?
Well, I think so. And I mean, this is going to be a season of change, and more so than the last few years. I mean, in terms of change, last year was mostly internal, with the exception of obviously John Tavares. This year, I think you're going to see promotions from the Marlies, but I also think that because of the cap situation, you're going to see players move out. I mean, I've talked to a couple different reporters, and they sort of agree that it's going to be a changeover of 6 or 7 players from last year's roster. That's significant. That's a third of the roster. So I think that, get ready for, and it may not be blockbuster moves, but they're going to be significant changes.
So do those changes bring with them questions and concerns and an unexpectedness to what is to come, Mike? Or are we thinking these changes should solidify this team for the better? That's what I'd like to know.
It's going to be both. I think that they're going to make. I believe that they're going to make a move for a defenseman, somebody who can play in the top four to add to Muzzin and Riley and to replace Gardner, because I simply do not think that Gardner is going to be back. Even if they trade Zaitsev and get nothing back, because Gardner is going to make a lot more than Zaitsev is making right now. But they have to bring in another top four defenseman to balance out their blue line. The numbers going out right now are Gardner, Hainsey, and then Dermott is Ozaganov is already gone, and Dermott's going to be out until November. So I think that's task A for Kyle Dubas, is to find that top four defenseman, and we'll see how he does.
What's on the slate for the Leafs at the upcoming draft in your favorite city, Vancouver?
Well, they picked 53rd, so I'll be twiddling my thumbs on day one unless Kyle Dubas trades up. And when he was at the draft combine in Buffalo, he did say that was a possibility, but I think he was just saying that not to rule out any chance that they do. But they're going to be picking at the lower part of the second round, and obviously, they'll draft the best players available at their picks. But we're talking 2 or 3 years before any of these guys even get a chance or a sniff at the NHL.
This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. Our most recent podcast, Feeling the Leafs Blues, not doing too well on YouTube. I know the thumbnail is of Tyler Bozak and Alex Steen and the Stanley Cup champion Blues. So that has cut into the appeal of the product that we've recently put out, but I don't care. I'm really busy with my job. Mike's pretty busy too. We should be getting a lot of hits on that anyway, because it's great content. So while you're listening to that, go back and double back on that as well. We appreciate your support. Eddie Burla on Twitter. What was your party routine after watching Kawhi, Kyle, Fred, and Spicy P win the championship? Ed, my routine? Well, actually, we woke the kids up because I've figured this might be the only championship my kids get to see. A major championship. So we may as well wake them up and just let them watch, and then they went back to bed like 5 minutes later. It's important. So for me, I just went to bed because I'm so tired and had to get up at like 6 a.m. You, Mike, I know they were honking horns in Cheektowaga and Lackawanna and Livonia and the greater Buffalo area.
Yeah, I was out marching. No, I honestly I watched the game. I watched some of the post game, and then I went to sleep.
Yeah, I hear you. Eli Cohen. Let's get this out of the way quick, and then let's not talk about it ever again. Eli, we love you. You've been with us since the beginning. Eli wants to know, there's been speculation that Marner might be traded, or if he or his father are demanding Matthews money. What's the best possible return the Leafs could get in trading Marner? It's not going to happen. But in fantasy land, right, let's appease the Nylanderites who are all crossing their fingers that Mitch Marner's traded and William Nylander survives and gets more of the spotlight.
I honestly don't know what the return would be, because it's a scenario that I don't fathom. I mean, honestly, I think there's been some talk about teams threatening offer sheets, and I think the Leafs' response to those teams is go ahead, make my day. Because I think if there's unless they really, and you got to remember, and I was told this by Kevin Allen of USA Today on a recent Hockey Buzzcast, you got to remember in these offer sheets, teams are making the offer sheet as tough to match as possible, meaning front loading and all these other things. But then if the other team doesn't match, they're the ones who get hurt by that contract. So a offer sheet is fraught with peril. And I really think that right now, all the talk about offer sheets when it comes to Marner is leverage being used by Darren Ferris. And he's doing his job as an agent to get the best deal for Marner. But I do not believe he wants to go anywhere. And I do not believe the Leafs will trade him. As long as Toronto is dealing in a reasonable contract in a reasonable fashion, and they're not lowballing him, I think a deal gets done.
But OK Blue Jays tells us on Twitter that Marner is overrated. Sure.
Okay.
On the YouTube community platform, Mike, let's take it back to 2013. JC wants to know if the Leafs should go after Dion and James Reimer.
Well, okay, Dion has been bought out. There are rumors about Reimer potentially being bought out. I don't know whether there's any interest in Phaneuf in coming back, but if it's a 1 year at
Sure,
$750,000
for
on
a
a bottom
couple of
as a bottom
bones.
pair, well, this is the scenario with Reimer. He's got 2 more years at 3.4 million. Nobody is trading for him at that. Florida likely wants to get in on Sergei
Sure.
Bobrovsky. They have a cap disaster with Luongo turning 40 years old, and he's in a situation where he's coming to the end of it. But that's a contract that's almost impossible to move, and probably not going to be bought out. So Reimer is the guy. Even if they retain 50% of his salary, his cap hit is
Yeah,
1.7 million. I wrote about this today on Hockey
that's a
Buzz
lot.
about options, backup options. That's too
Yeah.
much. The only way that James Reimer is ever coming back to Toronto is if he is bought out by Florida and he comes in on a 1 year
True.
deal. If that happens, it's possible. If he's got 2 more years, it's not happening.
Could Dion Phaneuf play the role, at least spiritually, of Ron Hainsey?
If they brought back Phaneuf, there would be no putting him on the top pairing with Morgan Riley because he's simply not
Yeah.
mobile enough. But he could play. He could play bottom pairing as long as he would be limited to a
Yeah.
bottom pairing role, and he's making money that you can bury in the minors if it doesn't work out. Then it's a deal. It's a no risk
Mm-hmm.
deal. So why not do it? But whether he agrees to that, I don't think so. I think he's going to find some other place to play.
The Leafs defense needs some help, but do you want to bring in like reclamation projects or placeholders instead of allow some of the younger guys to flourish? I think six of one, half dozen of the other in terms of what the results will be of that. If you want to make a forward march and win, you're going to need real impact players on the back end to help create those positive results, but also be there to mentor and guide the younger stars who are certainly hungry to get their chance, Michael.
It's all a question of, I mean, we know, and I think it's fairly apparent that the Leafs will be bargain basement shopping
Yeah, okay.
this summer. It was a positive result when they got Tyler Innes for $650,000. Why not do it? Because again, if it doesn't work out, you can waive the player or you can send him down to the minors, and it doesn't hurt you on the cap. But they need probably one or two of those guys to come in on a
Mm-hmm.
minimum salary with an opportunity to make an impression. Innes is probably going to make more money someplace else this upcoming summer because he had 12 goals in a fourth line role with the Leafs. It's an opportunity for some of these players to come in. So I think that Dubas will be looking, and I think there'll be players that will be interested. So that's the way I
Yeah, I
think they'll
don't
go.
know if you need to bring in any more forwards other than ask St. Louis if they'll loan us Ryan O'Reilly, because there are tons of cats coming up through the pipeline, and they need their opportunity. I don't think there's an issue with the offense of this team. We know it's going to be one of the best, could be even better than last year. You never know; it could have the most dominant season in the history of the league this coming season because they have the talent. But I still feel like they need some grit there, and that's where a Mason Marchment could come in. I think he's wise beyond his years, too, considering the pedigree and what he's been able to accomplish and who he's played under with the Toronto Marlies. It's that blue line that is going to be the conundrum for Kyle Dubas. Which way are you going to go? Add placeholders, fill it with the young guys, or are you going to bring in someone of impact and shake up your roster? It should be interesting to see how it all plays out. Robert Ferrugia wants to know about Anton Strawman.
Well, he's a UFA, obviously, and he's coming to the end of it with Tampa. There's some talk about some of the veteran guys like Coburn or Girardi or Strawman re-signing in Tampa for a lower amount. Strawman has been the defense partner for Victor Hedman off and on for years, so it's very possible that, he goes back to the Lightning for a chance to win the Stanley Cup. Now, in terms of him going out in free agency, I mean, if he does, it's not going to be a bargain. It's probably going to be, around what they paid Ron Hainsey for 2 years, which was $2 to $3 million. So I really don't know whether the Leafs are going to dip into the unrestricted free agent defense market, because there are not that many defensemen out there, and the ones that are there are going to get overpaid. I think their improvements are going to either come internally, whether they want to promote Liljegren or Sandin, and they may think it's too early for one or both of them, or in trades, because in trades it's salary going out and salary coming in, and I think that benefits them in their current cap situation over going out and signing UFAs.
From the community platform, Cool and Trending, talking about how Boston was so revered and that many believe no team could neutralize the Bruins. Well, he says the Blues proved otherwise. Cool and Trending. The Blues were the last team standing, and Boston almost got past them. What he's asking, though, is what the Maple Leafs need to do to be like the Blues and neutralize the Bruins before the Bruins eliminate them from the playoffs in 2020. Is it the same game plan? Do they have to change the way they play? Do they need better players, Mike?
Well, I think that the signal or the lesson to be learned from the Blues is that teams have to be multifaceted. They can't be one thing. You can't be a pure speed team. You can't be a pure, rough and tumble team. You have to be able to play different types of games against different opponents. Boston did that. I think they were more physical against Toronto. They were more skilled against Columbus. And in the end, the reason they lost to St. Louis is because I think they got worn down and beaten down by a Blues team that played heavy hockey, and guys like Oscar Sundqvist and Zach Sanford and Patrick Maroon and some of their defensemen, I think, body checked and hit the Bruins so much that after 3 rounds, they didn't. Once they got up 2-0 in Game 7, I thought it was over with, because I didn't think Boston had anything left in the tank. And for the Leafs to be able to beat the Bruins or beat the Lightning, they're going to have to maintain their skill, but they're also going to have to find role players who can provide that jam, that sandpaper, that size and strength. If they do that, then they have a good chance of winning in our lifetime. But who knows?
We're doubling back a little bit, but our buddy Dude Blaine on Twitter wants to know about Engvall and Marchment. What are their chances of making the team out of training camp? I'll ask you, Mike, who has the better chance of making it?
I think Marchment does, but I think Engvall has a pretty good chance of being this team's fourth line center. Marchment plays the type of game that I was just talking about. He's on a low contract. I think he's improved his skill level that I don't think he would be a liability on the fourth line. He can score. He likes to hit. He likes to get underneath the skin of the opposition. I think he's a perfect fit. If he has a good training camp, I think he makes the team on their fourth line. Engvall is a better, more talented version of Freddie Gauthier. He's not tough, but he is skilled, more skilled than Gauthier. He scored 19 goals last year for the Marlies. He can play center and wing. He's big. He's rangy. He's got a long reach. I think he's, like I said, a better version of the GOAT, a more effective version of the GOAT. And I think if they give him an opportunity, he will beat out Gauthier in training camp.
Mike, do you believe that you can play harder than your opposition, want it more, and succeed?
Yeah, I think there are players and there are teams out there that are talented, and sometimes the difference is work ethic. I think, it's very, 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 I'm not saying that Tampa Bay was lazy because they lost to Columbus in 4 straight, but I think a complacency got set in there when they won the President's Trophy. They were better than everybody, and all of a sudden things went wrong, and they didn't know how to pull out of a sort of a nosedive. That can happen.
What does that tell you about the playoffs?
I think they're two. Well, I've always thought they're two completely different things.
Exactly. You win with skill in the regular season. You win with more than skill in the playoffs. The reason I asked that question is because I just finished watching a postseason press conference with Nick Nurse, head coach of the NBA champion Toronto Raptors. And he talked about how Kyle Lowry played harder than everybody on the floor. And he showed his team a video of Kyle Lowry going for loose balls, trying to block shots all over the court. And he asked his team, can we all play like Kyle, maybe just a little bit more? The people who are actually succeeding at the highest level will say, skill's great, but you need more.
Certain players offer something that is uncalculatable, and that's what we're talking about here. Zach Hyman is a player that works and hustles every minute he's on the ice. He doesn't shirk his responsibilities. He doesn't leave anything to chance. There are other players that are talented on this team and on other teams that they have all the ability in the world, but you see it only when they feel like playing that way. And I think that's, that is the difference between winning and losing a lot of times. Most of the time, these teams, talent-wise, are even. It's who wants it more. And that's all. And that's always been the case. And I don't care if there is not an analytic to measure that. It always will be the case.
Especially in a physical sport like hockey.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the case in every sport, even one like baseball, which is a slave to analytics. There are players get hot. Players, I know that there've been examples in baseball where a player's on a red hot streak. He's hit like 5 home runs in the last 2 games, and they sit him because he doesn't match up against this pitcher, or he's a left-handed batter against a left-handed pitcher. Yeah. No, hot is hot. You stay with them, and if a player is hot in the in hockey, you don't change things. Now in hockey, they don't take players out of the lineup, but I'm just saying there's something that is not measurable that has to be factored in.
So if you play 82 in the regular season, then 7, so 28 plus 82, you're 110 games, right? Do you think your skill level at game 110 is going to be the same as it was in game 50? Not a chance. Is your hunger and desire at game 50 the same as it is at game 110? Not a chance. What are you winning with at game 110?
You're winning with that, that unknown commodity.
Exactly.
It's more guts, and it's less, what you hate. Tell me that any one of those players, 20 players on the bench or on the ice, in game 7, tell me if any of them were 100% in terms of health.
No doubt. We're not telling tales out of school, Mike. This is obvious. We've seen it with the Raptors. We've seen it with the Blues. We'll see it again next year and the year after that. You can have all the skill in the world, but if you don't have that hunger to win and you don't outplay the competition, you will never, ever win. Ever. And you'll win nothing. Right? So I think that's the lesson for what Kyle Dubas is up to now. His team, his crew. How do you take it forward, right? How do you take it forward? Last word to you, Mike.
Well, I think we're going to see some news in the next few days leading up to the draft. Whether that means a contract being signed or maybe a trade of Nikita Zaitsev. I think that you'll see something leading up to the draft, even if it's a minor deal involving Sparks. I get the feeling that something will happen in the days leading up to Friday night in Vancouver. So stay tuned.
I am pumped up for that Raptors parade. I hope everyone enjoys the heck out of it. It's going to be one of the best parades we have seen, capping off a major sports championship in a long period of time, not just in Toronto, but right across the board. And I hope it makes the Raptors hungry to come back and win another championship. I also hope it makes the Maple Leafs hungry to duplicate what the Raptors are about to do, and that's celebrate a major championship. Because the Leafs have the opportunity. They just have to make the right moves. Michael, thanks a lot, buddy. Enjoy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norman.
We would like to thank Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, title sponsor of the Leafs Convo, demonstrating passion for the industry and a superior level of excellence in selling, leasing, and marketing your property. Vanguard Northeast Realty.